Hi friends, it's Macky and Alexa, and we're here today to share our top 15 books for 2018 each. So you're going to be hearing about 30 books or series that we read in the last year and that we really loved. We actually filmed this video once, and I read another book and realized that it immediately had to be on my top 15, so we had to do it again. And it's... Well, Macky was agreeable to it because it's sort of like a reroll.
For those of you who love Dungeons & Dragons, and I don't mind a reroll every so often. So a couple of things before we get into it. Alexa doesn't do her, with the exception of her last two books, maybe, she doesn't really do her books in order, whilst I, on the other hand, do mine in ascending order of awesome. To me, of course, because this is about our opinions, after all, and we're happy to always share them where people like to listen. The other thing would be that before we go and get into the kind of 15 each, we just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of other maybe books, series that sort of just had to be put on the map. So I'm going to start, and the first one would have to be the Koshil's Dart series. So this is the OG copy. Thank you, Kristen, by the way, for this lovely original kind of very collector's edition. I was about to say collectorable. It's a story about a young girl who discovers that she was created to yield in all ways, forms, and fashions, and the pleasure that follows. Amidst all of that, finds the strength to actually become a hero that her realm and that her loved ones needed at just that time. So I was expecting something kind of terribly porny and erotic, but it was actually a lot of court intrigue, which I normally hate, but apparently I like if the lore is good enough. And there's a lot of heroism here, a lot of character development, and just this beautiful sweeping storytelling that made me love this series so much. So first 6 books, massive, huge commitment, but definitely recommend to anybody who wants a really good tale. The next sort of shout out that I wanted to give was this year I finally got to read the Darkest Minds series by Alexandra Bracken. Alex Bracken is a great writer, and as lovely a person as she is as a writer, apparently she's really awesome. I had a chance to meet her. I really love this story because it's a story of found families set amidst a world where kids suddenly develop 5 kinds of superpowers, and the government basically cracks down on that and tries to herd them off and make sure that they don't do any mayhem, which they end up doing anyway. And amidst all of that, trying to establish freedom. It's kind of a really great story. We watched the movie this year, which was fun. There is a 4th book in the series that I'll leave Alexa to speak about, because that was always super cool. I'll have some comments there too, but I had to give it a shout out because Darkest Minds was it's great. It made me cry like a lot, because it's just a great family underneath all of that, for reasons, and plus the lore is wonderful, right, with the 5 different kinds of mental superpowers, and I'm down for superpowers, and me and my friends save the world. And then lastly, I just wanted to give a shout out to all of the Dungeons and Dragons books, pretty much almost ever, that we've gotten. You'd see, and I mean all, you'll see them in our halls, right, where every so often like a book comes out and it's this huge hardbound like giant thing that you can kill bugs with, and I think people, if you tried hard enough, maybe, and it's just a great way to start telling stories in a different way. And my creativity has, I think, improved. Friendships have improved as well and leveled up, if that's terminology, and I kind of like that there are tools out there. I've always described these Dungeons and Dragons books as like the Home Depot of telling stories, where you've got, like, if you want to make a bathroom, you've got, all the bathroom tools. Here, if you want to make a story about monsters and demons, and you want, fighters, and you want just all kinds of creatures and factions and all these kinds of things, it's all there if you want to create a story, and it's a lovely sandbox to dip into and tell stories with. So, yeah, it's been fun, and that's pretty much been the year of D&D for me, and wouldn't have happened without the books, so appreciate that. I guess it's my turn. So, one author duo that I'm going to give a shout out to, just because I have enjoyed everything I've read from them, is Christina Lauren. So I read Roomies at the start of the year, followed shortly by the first 3 books in the Wild Season series. That's Sweet Filthy Boy, Dirty Rowdy Thing, Dark Wild Night. Those are the 3 I read. And then I also read Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. What I love about these ladies and their books is that they write characters that are so easy to fall in love with. Every story is a love story, but it's approached from a different angle and with different kinds of relationships, and I think they do it so well. Of the ones I mentioned, I think the 3 that I love the most are Roomies, which was very entertaining, Dark Wild Night, and Dirty Rowdy Thing. Other than that, the other 2 books I wanted to mention would have made my top 15, but they're not actually out yet. They are coming out shortly after seeing this video. So first is The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is the sequel to The Cruel Prince, which came out this year, 2018, while we're filming this. The Cruel Prince is essentially the story of a mortal girl who has been taken to the fairy realm with her sisters, and now has to figure out how to carve a place for herself in that brutal and magical world. And it's very good. It has a lot of court intrigue as well, but it also has a lot of like the
inner manipulations and machinations of fairies and fae and all of that stuff, and it's just so good. And the sequel just develops that story even more, and I am so excited for the next one. Another book that is also coming out in January, but towards the end of the month, is The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. My comp titles for this book are basically Six of Crows, set in Paris, meets National Treasure, meets Indiana Jones. And I think that's a pretty accurate way of describing it. It has this ragtag bunch of people who all have different goals, but they come together to perform this heist because it will lead them to something that will help with that goal. And it's just so good. I enjoyed it so tremendously. Rosh's writing is very lush and vibrant, and I just felt transported while I read it. I also enjoyed all the puzzles that they had to try and figure out, and best of all, I really enjoyed the characters. So definitely keep an eye out for this one in a couple of weeks.
Sweet. Alrighty, so now we can deep dive into the top 15 books of 2018. Super awesome. We've got quite a few books to get through, so here we go. My number 15 would have to be The Serpent Secret by Santani Dasgupta. And I thought this was actually the Riordan imprint because I knew that Rick Riordan's kind of imprint was going to publish a book, which is actually Arusha. This book is about a young girl who discovers that she's apparently a princess, descended from a very important line of people, and suddenly gets hunted on her birthday. I think it's her 11th birthday or what is it, and has no choice but to sort of adventure, meet new friends, and try to prevent the end of the world and her apparent demise that has been marked out for her.
Scary.
Just the cover alone is enough to win you over. If anyone wants to ask me why did I love this book, look at her. She's decked out like a princess, but she's got a golden bow and arrow standing atop a giant cobra head. That's actually a very accurate description of sort of what happens in this story and the kind of heroism that we can expect from her. So strong female character with a huge destiny, which is also like a princess. I'm down for this kind of princess. So very, very great story. So highly recommend for anybody who likes middle grade.
So I'm going to start with the last book that I read, the reason that we had to review this entire video. That is The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale. This actually came out years ago, and it got repackaged, I think, last year, I want to say.
Cool.
This is from Book Outlet. This copy is actually a little banged up, so I'm going to be replacing it. But essentially, this is a YA retelling of the Goose Girl fairy tale, and it's so good. If you're familiar with the story of the Goose Girl, it is essentially where a princess and her lady-in-waiting, they end up switching places because the lady-in-waiting wants to take her place, and she ends up having to be forced to become a goose girl in this neighboring kingdom that she's traveled to. I know I'm doing like a terrible job of describing, but let me just tell you, there's something very engaging and charming about the way Shannon Hale told this story. Her character, especially the main character, her characters are so strong, and I especially love just this main character because I fell in love with who she was as a person and like all of her little like quirks and personality traits, and it was really great. And just the budding friendships, the way that this main character, hurdles all of the obstacles in her way, the romance, which is very slow burn and very, very slight, and I still ship it. It's very good. It was very engrossing. I read it in an entire day and like in one sitting because I couldn't put it down, and I'm so excited to continue with the companion novels in the series, but I would definitely recommend checking this one out if you have not yet and you love fairy tale retellings.
My number 14 is a shout out to my 5 favorite X titles. For those of you who love the X-Men, 2018 was a pretty good year for the X-Men comic series, if you kind of like the stories that they printed out, of course. And I am talking about X-Men Blue, X-Men Gold, X-Men Red, the Jean Grey series, and All New Wolverine, which is technically Laura Kinney. So if there are any fans of X-23 out there, she took on the Metal of Wolverine for a while. She took her little sister along, her little sister clone named Gabby, who has been lovingly renamed Honey Badger, right? So you've got Wolverine and Honey Badger, and she is indeed the cutest, most charming X-Men to date. It's a huge story arc for all 5 folks, especially time-displaced Jean Grey, who leads her own tiny miniseries with her little Ginger Bob. And that's the Jean Grey's book, and where she struggles with, like discovering that she's time displaced and terrible things happen in the future. And X-Men Blue, harken to the Blue Strike Force of old, follows the time-displaced X-Men on their adventures. X-Men Gold follows Kitty Pryde, who now is headmistress of the Xavier School. They gave her the reins, and I think it's an absolutely great way to graduate. And then, of course, X-Men Red is when OG Jean Grey finally comes back to life. So many thoughts on that. But I recommend these titles to absolutely anybody who wants to try getting back into the X-Men all over again. They're absolutely fresh to me, well, to me anyway, and had so much fun with it. I mean, if anything, read it for Gabby, who is, the
That's not a bad reason.
The Great Honey Badger. All right, that's it.
My next book is The Way You Make Me Feel by Maureen Gu. This is the story of Clara, who's kind of a prankster, and then when her latest prank goes a little too far, she ends up grounded for the summer. And that means she has to work at her dad's food truck with her mortal enemy. The nice thing about this book is that it is, over the course of the summer, a story of this girl sort of realizing that maybe everything is not quite the way it seems to her, and it was just so refreshing to see that kind of story in YA again. I absolutely adore it. It's one of my favorite like contemporary plot tropes. Clara is such a lovable main character, and it was just nice to see her sort of develop this people sense where she could recognize that other people are maybe not exactly what she thought they were in her head. Her relationship with her friends, the potential romance in this one, and the relationship that she has with her father and her mother are all very interesting things to follow, and it was both like heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time, and I absolutely loved it, and I cannot wait for more books like this one from Maureen Gu.
Alrighty, my number 13 would have to be the Dragon Rider Legacy and Dragon Rider Chronicles series by Nicole Conway. These books just went down really like fast. Like I just devoured them sort of in an instant. But halfway through trying the first book, I ended up buying absolutely everything else that was sort of out of the series and sort of pre-ordered everything else that was on the way because it was a very, very accessible read. First of all, dragons. And specifically in this world, dragons were sort of commodified, almost like cattle even. And it's not great. But it's not an ideal world and an ideal time where our main character, Javid, who happens to be a half-elf, also not cool because they were at war with the elves at this time, ends up changing his entire existence when suddenly a wild dragon is kind of tamed by him, something that it would have either culled or let go and back into the wild, and he becomes a rider, and from there ends up getting set on a course of destiny where he changes the entire kingdom of Maldabar and maybe even saves it towards the end, which leads to the next series that I'm reading now that happens I think almost 100 years after and the events of the Chronicle series. Very interesting, and stars the Princess of Maldabar this time, who is a dragon rider as well, and she's totally badass and has no qualms about being a woman and a dragon rider at the same time. None of that, oh no, am I a woman, am I a girl, I hate no, this is like, I'm a woman and I will kick your ass because I'm riding this dragon. She's not wrong. What's not to love? Very accessible character, so I think Nicole Conway was able to strike that nice balance of contemporary. It feels contemporary, but it's definitely medieval. So, well, I liked it that way, so totally recommend anybody who likes that kind of thing.
Speaking of fairy tale retellings, I also wanted to include To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo on my list. Alexandra Christo is a debut author, and I almost can't believe that because To Kill a Kingdom was so good. It's basically like The Little Mermaid but with a siren twist to it, and I loved it. So Lyra, the main character, is our mermaid, and she does something that gets her in trouble and turned into a human, and the only way for her to redeem herself is to kill a particular prince and bring his heart back to her mother. On the flip side, the prince in question is Prince Elian, and he is basically on a mission to rid the seas of this siren problem. And of course their paths cross, and it's just so good. Just good in general to see how she really pulls from the original fairy tale and even from a little bit from like the Disney-fied version of it to tell this story, and also how she manages to like blow your mind with like how the siren lore works out and how everything plays out at the end. It was just so good. I really enjoyed it. I cannot wait to see what else she comes up with.
So number 12 on my series would have to be Fablehaven and Dragon Watch. I asked and it's like, can I read Dragon Watch straight off without reading Fablehaven? They're like, yeah, sure, you can jump right in. But in reality, you have to read the first 5 Fablehaven books, which are set in a world where there are magical preserves that are hidden from all human sight, and obviously, where fabled creatures and even demons reside. So they've got to contain all of the fables in that one place. Kendra and Seth Sorensen just happen to have grandparents who are caretakers of that site. Sure. That one fateful summer, they try to see if they have an affinity. Like the grandparents sort of test them and say, are they going to like notice that there's like crazy stuff going on? And they do, and it all goes downhill from there. And they uncover this plot to sort of overthrow all of the preserves and let all of the demons loose, and etc., etc. And they become heroes, full-blooded heroes, which leads straight into apparently Dragon Watch. So I'm so glad that I had to read all 5 Fablehaven books, because whatever they accomplish or fail to accomplish in the first 5 books leads straight into the next series. So no spoilers there. Apparently the story does continue. And Dragon Watch made me geek squeak. Like it just made me cheer so much for these characters, because though it took 5 books for them to grow into the heroes that I wish they were, man, I'm so glad that I stuck it out long enough. And so if you want the long haul, if you like a binge, a really good binge, grab all of them. Dragon Watch 2 is out. Highly recommend, because it's a great, grand old adventure of me and my friends save the world, which is really where Macky lives and will always stay forever and ever.
My next book is another contemporary, and that's Save the Date by Morgan Matson. This one is essentially a romantic comedy in book form.
Boy.
It is about the Grant family, particularly Charlie Grant, and it takes place over the course of her older sister's wedding weekend. And let me tell you, this is like a very stressful wedding weekend, because everything that you can think of that goes wrong goes wrong.
Unless you like the band Journey.
It's enjoyable, it's funny, it's heartwarming, it's heartbreaking. It is not just about all of the shenanigans that go down at this terribly like messed up wedding weekend. It's also about Charlie and her resistance to change and how that has to shift throughout the course of the book. It's also about the siblings and their relationships with one another and with their parents. And I love the combination of all of these things. I think Morgan Matson did an incredible job doing it. It's a very long book, considering it's only, I think, 3 days, but I think it was worth every page. I absolutely enjoyed the story, and I would highly recommend checking it out.
I would like to lead into my number 11 for the year, and this is Thrawn. Yes, just the one word, Thrawn. So for those of you who are familiar with the Legends universe that I'm still bitter about, Thrawn was a main central character who was an Imperial Admiral, Grand Admiral, who was known for his ability to do amazing strategy and outwit and defeat any enemy by studying their culture and their art. So in understanding how people think and create, he's able to destroy them in battle. And this is set in now the canon universe, sort of long before, you know, any of our other characters sort of come to the surface, and it shows how Thrawn had come to the employ of the Empire. It reads like a strategy and battle, I want to say masterclass, as though Thrawn was sort of teaching you as the story went along how to outsmart or outwit enemies. It ends very, very well, very, very satisfying. I have no idea how this guy lost to the rebels on TV, but whatever, they're the good guys, and I don't think Timothy Zahn was writing the TV series. I think if he were, they would have probably won at a greater cost. But that's just me being bitter about the Legends universe and loving Thrawn way too much. It's a great way to get back into the canon universe that is now canon, while taking something very well loved from the Legends universe and see it not just preserved, but even better. I have not seen Thrawn be this awesome. And he was already cool then, so highly recommend.
Okay, my next book is Sky in the Deep by Adrienne Young. This is also a debut novel. This one is like a fantasy book, but with Viking inspiration in it.
Yes.
It's about main character Elin, who is a trained warrior, and she has known all her life that she is meant to kill her enemies. I believe they're called the Aska. So one time, when she's in a battle, she suddenly sees her brother, who she thought had been dead, and that's been like her reality for 5 years. And everything is upended when she realizes he's actually alive and he's living with their sworn enemies. And so she ends up captured by them because she's too shocked to do much of anything, really. And she ends up spending the winter with them. Multiple times in this video, I have said that the character discovers that there's more to the other party than what they think there is. That is very true in this particular novel. I really enjoyed seeing how things unfolded. I don't really read a lot of fiction that has like a Viking bent to it, so that was really interesting. So it was very, very good. It was also very satisfying to get to that ending, and I am definitely looking forward to the next novel that she has coming out, because it features the same world, but it's a completely new story with a completely new main character, and I cannot wait.
All right, rounding up to the top 10 books. So with number 10, yeah, for me.
Let's specify here.
To me. So number 10 for me would have to be North and South from the Avatar: The Last Airbender kind of graphic novel series. And they're all set after the events of the TV series.
Which you should watch
if you haven't. Which you should totally watch if you haven't. For those of you who are, so I'm talking to people who are fans of the Avatar: The Last Airbender series. North and South talks about how Katara and Sokka finally come home to the Southern Water Tribe, only to find that it's sort of being developed into something more urban, based on the Northern Water Tribe sort of like thing, and which sparks a kind of loyalist uprising where the Southern Water Tribe folks feel like their culture is being eroded by the Northerners. So for them to resolve this actual ship that is sailing before their very eyes, and with it all of the cultural strife, while me and my friends try to save my world, it's just fun when if and when parts of the cavalry sort of arrive in the form of maybe some old friends that are doing other things right now, because, you know, some of them are fire lords or heads of their own corporations, you know, that kind of thing. It's always fun to follow their stories, so a must-have. All the graphic novels are a must-have for any Avatar: The Last Airbender. A lot of catching up to do. So lots of catching up. It's all here, and highly recommend for anyone who likes it. My
next book is My Plain Jane, which is by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. This is the second book in their Lady Janies series of companion novels, and this one is a fantastical, true retelling of what happens with Jane Eyre. There are three main characters. Jane, who is a girl who has suffered through a lot of hardship and is finally going to make a new life for herself by being a governess at this place called Thornfield Hall. And there's her best friend Charlotte, who wants to be a novelist and decides that she wants to chronicle her best friend Jane's story.
Last name?
Bronte.
Aha.
And the last character is a boy named Alexander, who is part of a ghost hunting society.
There you go. That's the retelling. That's the retelling.
So this is Jane Eyre meets Ghostbusters, basically. And it is just so much fun to read. It's very tongue-in-cheek, and if you have read the original Jane Eyre, all the references will probably either make you laugh or go like, that is very clever, and that is a very smart way to be using that item. I really enjoyed it. I also enjoyed the first novel, but for some reason this one just has a special place in my heart. I think it's just because I enjoyed Charlotte so much as a character, and Alexander so much, and Jane so much. I think actually of the three, my favorite is Alexander, but that's probably because I'm biased. Anyway, it's a very fun story. I think it's something that a lot of people will enjoy, whether or not you've read Jane Eyre. It's just, you know, major bonus for you if you have. And I think you should definitely read it if you haven't already. You don't have to read the first one in order to read this one, mind you. But definitely check it out. Also, if you're wondering why this cover does not look like the cover you've seen online, it's because it's the Alcatraz exclusive edition, which has a different color scheme.
Rounding down to number 9 on my list would have to be Titans Hunt and the Titans Rebirth series, and by extension, the Titans TV series. So there is definitely a huge bromance between Dick Grayson and Donna Troy that I absolutely need in my life, and that these graphic novels and even the Titans TV series have brought together. I feel this is the year of the Titans. I mean, Titans Rebirth talks about how they finally remembered that they were actually the Titans from the old pre-New 52, pre-Flashpoint series, where they were kids who grew up together and were sort of just the sidekicks that were on the side but decided to take center stage, which is really the story of the Titans, and a coming-of-age story that has not been afforded to most young superhero sidekicks that they've discovered together, which is also their flagship Titans Together kind of thing, which I love. And so it celebrates that. It gets sparked by the return of Carrot Top Wally West. He comes back finally, undisplaced by time, or rather placed properly, and he just sparks everybody's memories back, and everybody suddenly remembers not just that they were friends, but that Wally existed. Now that he's here, they get a fresh start, and my OG team is back and making waves and being awesome as grown-ups this time and no longer as kids. So that's always great. Any Titans fans, this is your book series.
Macky actually alluded to this one earlier, and it's The Darkest Legacy by Alexander Bracken. This is book 4, I want to say, of the Darkest Mind series, although technically it's a spin-off and can be read completely separate. It's about one of the characters in the original series, and that's Zoo, and this is 5 years later, and she's now a spokesperson for the government about Psi and their powers. Only one day, when she's at an event, there is this big horrific event that happens, like a terrorist attack, and she's blamed for it because it looks like she used her abilities to do it. And so the entire book is just her trying to figure out how to clear her name and who really did it, only to uncover that there is a conspiracy bigger than that. It's so good. Like, I was really both excited and terrified to jump back into this world, because it's always very hard to imagine like what sort of story is going to come out of a series you already read and loved years ago. I'm glad she went with a different narrator. I think it's so interesting to see Zoo narrate, because she has a different like view of the world. Like, she has this love for her ability and like what she can do, as opposed to like Ruby, who was struggling with hers in the first trilogy.
And Zoo grew up in a totally different era at this point in time, and so as a sort of a young adult in this one, she has her different take, which I love too.
It was very, very fun to follow. Heartbreaking at times, and very exciting to see all the cameos. I want to say, like, there are like a lot of appearances from people you know and love if you've read the first trilogy, which was so great and so much fun. I think it ends on a very strong note, and it's definitely a standalone, but I would be more than happy to read another book if it featured Zoo and the new characters in this book, Roman and Priyanka. I would happily read another book.
Now lead back to my number 8, which just happens to be, and I do want to flash this cover because the actual cover that came out, this is the art, is super spoilery. It's not even funny. So this is the Adventurers Guild Part 2, Twilight of the Elves. I had read Zach Lauren Clark and Nick Eliopoulos' first book, The Adventurers Guild, by accident actually, and it's great. It's a story about two friends, a half-elf and sort of like merchant spawn. I'm I've got sort of like a family business type deal, but I've forged my own path type kid. And they basically end up joining the Adventurers Guild, one of the guilds that helps bring stuff from the outside world, which is, by the way, post-apocalyptic, and anything that ventures out there dies unless you're guild level, to sort of keep the town alive and whatever. And they end up teaming up with some of their new guild members to save basically their city, or what's left of it. This takes place, I want to say a few months after that, after their first foray into adventure, and the renown and the disadvantages of having that, where a kind of a larger plot happens. It's super cliffhangery, which is, of course, every second book probably should be. Very Empire Strikes Back, very, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next? It's me and my friend save the world all over again with, and this is why I recommend it, with, it may as well be a love song to Dungeons and Dragons. I read the first book thinking, oh cool, fantasy, but now with my Dungeons and Dragons goggles, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much Dungeons and Dragons stuff. Even the front cover is so spoilery, and you'll know when you read it. So maybe it won't make sense when you pick it up the first time, but read it anyway, and then you'll see. Very, very Dungeons and Dragons-y.
My next book is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Ngan, another debut novel. There are quite a few on this list. In this world, 8 paper girls, who are like the lowest case, have no magical ability or bestial features, are chosen to serve the Demon King in any way he wants them to. And this year something different happens because there is a 9th paper girl chosen, our main character Lei, and she's chosen for her golden eyes because those are an unusual feature in a paper girl. And so she goes to the palace, and while she's there she gets trained in all the ways that she can serve the Demon King. She realizes that there is a revolution brewing because some people are not content with how things are run, and also she falls in love, but it's a forbidden romance because it's definitely with someone that she should not be falling in love with. And it is really, really good. I was really anticipating reading this book back when I first got to borrow a copy from my friend DJ, and when I finally read it, I was just so engrossed in this story. There's such violence and such terrible things in it, but also there's such good stuff and there's such hope in it that I love that. But what I especially loved is seeing the main character Lei go from someone who is kind of just like flailing about trying to figure out what she's doing and why she's there and how to get out of it and how to go home, and to see her grow into the kind of person who would commit to fighting for a world where things could be different and things could be better. I thought that was so fascinating, and I'm very intrigued to see where this goes next, especially after that ending.
Ha! Speaking of the end of cliffhangers, my number 7 would have to be Queen of Air and Darkness. Now, some of you have seen me spew angst about this entire series, or just declare that I'm complete trash for the Shadowhunters universe. Queen of Air and Darkness brings a close to the Dark Artifices trilogy, set after the events of the first 6 books about Jason Clary and their sort of Shadowhunter adventures in that mortal war, where the main characters are now the Blackthorn family, and plus Emma Carstairs, who may as well be sort of part of the family. They grew up together. They were the 2 little children in the mortal war that were sort of that Cassie Clare sort of kind of give a little bit of focus on, probably knowing she was going to write about them in this one. It made my number 7 for one reason and one reason alone. His name is Julian Blackthorn. I never wanted to be a Shadowhunter all my life, ever, until Julian, and I thought, my goodness. And to see him grow, and here's the thing, he doesn't come into this thing being the badass. That's technically Baby Jace's role, by the way, and by Baby Jace I mean Emma Carstairs. But then for Julian to actually grow up, come into his own, and then realize his own power when they needed him the most is, I think, one of the greatest character developments, and first of all in the story, and in a long time too. I would recommend this to anybody who loved the Mortal Instruments series, and for anybody who just wanted to start something else and something new. It's a great way to end it, and lucky you that you didn't have to live through the cliffhanger of the second book, which was the worst cliffhanger
so
in a book. I still am. Oh, I'm so bitter about so many things about this, by the way, but that's just me being trash.
My next book is American Panda by Gloria Chow, another debut novel from this year. I really enjoyed this one because it is about a main character named May, who is Taiwanese American, and her parents expect her to follow the following path. She has to go to school at MIT, get her degree, become a doctor, and marry a pre-approved Taiwanese Ivy Leaguer. So, typical Asian expectations there. What I loved about this story is that May herself is struggling with the fact that she wants to respect all of these cultural things that are expected of her from by her parents, but she also wants to stand up for herself because she grew up in a different society, in a different country, and has a different way of thinking. And so the entire novel is just about that, her coming to terms with the fact that maybe what she wants isn't necessarily a bad thing, and maybe sometimes she has to stand up and speak up for herself. And also it's also nice because she's not the type of character who immediately just rebels. She's trying to be conscious of the fact that her parents really just want what's best for her, and they think they know what it is, and she's trying to respect that, but at the same time honor what she knows is true in her heart. And it's just very, very good. I really enjoyed it. It made me emotional. Cannot wait to see what Gloria Chow does next.
My number, I want to say 6 would be the Bane Chronicles. Yeah, to no one's surprise. I seem to gravitate more towards side characters than the main characters, which
That's actually me too.
Right? I mean, it's a thing in this house. House Santiago is like basically we love the main characters, sure, but the side characters are where it's at. This isn't just a story purely. Yeah, and I had to check the publication date. This happened before Magnus ever laid eyes on Alec Lightwood. And there are some juicy stories about Magnus and Alec here. I can't wait. To the point where...
OTP, man. OTP.
Definitely the OTP. And here's the thing. I've had the Bane Chronicles for a while now and just couldn't get into it until you'll figure out what my #1 book is. But so that #1 book was kind of like the gateway drug to all things. Like, I would not be here if not for a #1 book. More on that later. But I would recommend the Bane Chronicles because it does tell the story of Magnus. It does sort of broaden the world of the Shadowhunters. And for those of you who ship Magnus and Alec hard, the one thing that I say this book, because I was never an Alec Lightwood fan, pretty much almost ever, and I'm still kind of not now, but I used to sort of really not like him. But now that I've seen him through Magnus's cat eyes, man, if a book can do that, it's like, oh no, I have to like Alec now because now I know how you see him, Magnus. Really? Are you doing this to me, Magnus? Damn you, Bane. And Cassandra Clare, apparently, by extension, because she's so good. And she milks this thing, and it's a great story. She has great co-writers in this one, and it's an enjoyable set of reads for anybody who wants more of the Shadowhunters books.
My next book is Legendary by Stephanie Garber, which is the companion sequel to Caraval, which came out last year.
Caraval, yes, I remember that one.
Legendary takes off right after the events of Caraval, so Tella is finally free, Scarlet has won Caraval, she's managed to fall in love with someone, and it's great and everything, except that Tella has made a bargain with a mysterious stranger, and she needs to find out the real name of the Caraval master, who is only known as Legend to everyone. And so in order to get that name, she has to play another game of Caraval. This time she's a player and not, you know,
cool,
what she was in the first book. But I have to say I really enjoyed this one. I think I loved it just a little bit more than Caraval, and it's because I enjoyed Tella as a main character. She is unapologetic about the fact that she loves the magic and the whimsy and the beauty of what Caraval is and all of that, all of the trappings of that. But she's also a very determined person who knows what her end goal is and what she wants to achieve, and she'll do what she has to get there. And it's so fascinating to see her story play out. Plus, you have the major bonus of meeting a character named Dante, who I absolutely love. He is amazing, and also this one ends on a strong note, but it's also enough of a cliffhanger for you to be like, but then how do we fix this in the third book? Which I am dying to know, so cannot wait till it comes out this year in 2019.
My #5, so down to the top 5 now. So our friend Lily sort of brought Alcatraz versus the evil librarians our way. She totally enjoyed this and really wanted to know what I thought because this was right up my alley, and it is. It absolutely is. It centers around Alcatraz Smedry, who discovers that he's of a long line of Smedrys, unique individuals who have the most insane abilities. For example, the ability to be late for absolutely everything, or the ability to just fall over. Sounds almost kind of useless, but in the context of this entire book, very, very cool, because apparently the world has been besieged by the evil librarians who have kept every aspect of the larger world secret, like dinosaurs that talk, for example, from the populace. And the Smedrys are part of a distant kingdom that have also been hidden by the librarians from all of us, who are here to liberate us from the evil librarians' sort of like sensory clutches. And if you think that's pretty cool and semi, kind of good tropey in terms of middle grade, the storytelling told from Alcatraz's point of view is so madcap and insane. It's almost making me think that Brandon Sanderson isn't really Brandon Sanderson, and he's actually a Smedry, like in disguise, like pretending to be Brandon Sanderson, educating us and warning us that the librarians are out to get you. The rest of what I want to say about this is going to be in the link to my review on Alexa's blog, because if you want an experience of what it's like to read this book, I like to think I'm pretty proud of that review, because reading that review will give you an impression of what the book is about and how the experience of reading is going to look like. So link is down there. Super awesome. Thank you, Mr. Sanderson, Mr. Smedry, for writing this book and warning the whole world about the terribleness that has encroached our vision.
My next book is Wildcard by Maria Lu, which is the follow-up to last year's Warcross, which I absolutely loved, as you guys know. This one happens also right after the events of Warcross, and unlike that book, it takes place over the course of a little over a week, I want to say.
About a week or so, yeah.
It's mind-blowing.
Good. Really good.
As someone who enjoys anime, like, it is fun to read a book that also plays out like one.
A very good one.
Yeah, it has all of the same sort of tropes that would fall into like an anime story.
And everything makes sense. That's the most amazing thing.
So good. Like, it, and also thematically, it brings up a lot of interesting questions about technology, ethics, people's right to make decisions.
And feelings.
Lots of feelings.
Lots of feelings.
Before I go on into this, basically Warcross, if you don't already know, was a book about a girl named Emika Chen who was a bounty hunter, and she needed to make a lot of cash right away. And one day she glitches into the opening ceremony game of this worldwide phenomenon known as Warcross, and she catches the attention of that game's creator, Hideo Tanaka, and she's flown over to Tokyo in order to become a competitor in the Warcross Championship games, because he needs her to sniff out who's been messing with the game's code. So good, and this is also equally good and very emotional and very intense, and I absolutely loved it and would highly recommend reading this duology back to back now that you don't have to wait to find out what happens.
Absolutely. Speaking of awesome books and writers as well, I would like, my number 4 would be the Red Right Hand and Black Goat Blues combo. There's going to be a third one in the Methos Trilogy, written by Levi Black. Now, Levi Black basically set out to write this series set in the Cthulhu kind of universe, but he had a different spin to it. A very modern, accessible spin, so kind of less Lovecrafty, more modern, paranormal, adult fantasy, where you've got a young woman who is just struggling to just survive whatever kind of trauma she'd experienced in her teens. She finds herself embroiled in this conflict between the elder gods, where she is chosen to be an avatar for one of them, and therefore must do some dirty work that she does not necessarily want to, and then just figures out her way from there. It's a great kind of way to take some lore and breathe some new life into it and make it accessible to like a new generation without having to destroy what was good about the old stuff, in bringing something cool and new to pretty much our generation. So that's pretty great.
My next one is an entire manga series, but I'm only going to hold the first one up because it's heavy. It's Fruits Basket by Natsuki Takaya. You guys have seen me talk about this series multiple times this year. It is essentially about a high schooler named Toru, and she has to sort of make her own way in the world after a big personal tragedy, and so she ends up camping out in a tent. However, what she doesn't realize is that the land that she's camping on is part of the holdings of a huge, like, rich clan known as the Soma clan. And when she's discovered, some of the Soma clan invite her to live in the house with them, and she in turn discovers their biggest secret, which is when certain members of the Soma clan are embraced by the opposite sex, they turn into animals of the zodiac. It's so ridiculous when I say it because it sounds like the craziest premise ever, but honestly, it blew me away. I was very invested in these characters. I quite enjoyed the shenanigans, but more than that, I enjoyed the character relationships, the histories that are revealed, the way that things progress over the course of the story. I did not sign up for all of those feelings. I didn't, but I had them, and it was great. It was even better to end this year knowing that they're redoing the entire anime. The first anime that was done stopped somewhere in the middle of, I think, this volume or the second volume.
Yeah.
The new one they're doing is going to do the entire thing, and I am so excited because
amazing.
It is so worth it. So definitely check this out.
Rounding up to my top 3 now, I have spoken up and down all year round about how awesome the Shadow Magic trilogy is by Joshua Kahn. It centers around the story of Thorn, who has sort of like a dark past and is running away from something and is caught as a slave and sold to the Shadow clan. And eventually he meets his new liege lord in the form of Lily Shadow, who inherits the rulership of the entire kingdom because her parents were murdered in a terrible, terrible kind of assassination. And now for the enemies of the realm to sort of be, surrounding them, Thorn and Lily find themselves in a situation where they're going to have to work together to survive this new regime. So it lasts for about 3 books. Lily comes into her own, Thorn comes into his own. I ship them so hard.
Me too.
And it's so amazing how the ship is super subtle and it's not on the nose, and it's actually very, very well played out, even if God knows I want more.
Who
but
doesn't,
the
really?
most important thing that I think makes Shadow Magic shine, apart from every other kind of tropey book that you see right now, is for all that Thrawn is the big strapping hero and does a lot of the big heroing things. Not a single one of his antics and efforts and accomplishments undermines Lily's own accomplishments, which I think is so unique, because there's always like that power play between, you know, the main character co-opting what, or even undermining what the other kind of main character, you know, sort of did. But whatever Lily has to do that makes her shine is helped by what Thrawn did, but is never eclipsed by it, or is even like undermined. And I think that's so rare that you get to have that strong female character have someone equally by her side that is you know, kind of male, but accomplishes like so much. So Lily and Thrawn are my jam for 2018. They're
so
awesome.
Good. Speaking of, I realized I did all 3 of them in a row, but this is another book where I'm like, it would be a great anime, or it felt like an anime, and that book is Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kogawa. Let me just read you what it says on the back first. A fox shapeshifter sworn to hide a mysterious scroll, a secret assassin under orders to kill to obtain it. Hunted by demons, gods, and shadows, their wary bond may break them or alter the course of the world.
I'm down for that. I want to steal this book and read it.
Like, that's actually a very good summary of this story, so I'm not going to go into what else it's about. But let me just tell you, it definitely reads like if an anime had been distilled into a book. That is literally this book. It has all of the very familiar anime tropes if you've ever watched one, but aside from that, even without having watched any anime, it's also just a good fantasy story. Like, it's really interesting because it has all the Japanese culture woven into the tale, and it's just, it plays out so well. The characters are so great. The story is so good. I'm literally dying to read the next book. Thanks. But really, this was such a pleasant surprise because I always go into books that have Japanese culture integrated into a fantasy story with very high expectations because I love so many animes that are obviously very similar to that, and to read one that actually fulfilled it, that actually like gave me the same vibes I get when I talk about Yone of the Dawn, or when I talk about Fushigi Yugi or Bleach or Naruto, which are all anime that I'm pretty much obsessed with. It was just so great, and I'm so happy that this book exists and that this series is going to continue, and I definitely think you guys should check it out.
My top 2 book, to nobody's surprise, would, speaking of anime laughter, would have to be Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy. And again, this was, at the time that we got this is actually one of the signed copies that we got at that one Cassandra Clare event in Barnes & Noble Hereabouts in New York, where she even had Simon from the TV series.
Yeah, Alberto Rosende.
Alberto Rosende to kind of co-sign, because this is technically set after the events of the first 6 books. Vignettes, stories that are sort of run from the past about the Shadowhunter Academy, running parallel to the main story of the first sort of batch of Shadowhunter Academy graduates after the big war that happened in the first 6 books. Sat on the shelf for pretty much ever until I read my #1 set of book series. Again, more on that later. This only, technically I love this more than the first 3 books that I'm going to talk about in my #1 slot, but the reason why it's sort of bumped down to #2 is because I would not have loved these stories, nor the Bane Chronicles stories, nor any other kind of story, if not for my #1 set of books, which will not be a surprise to any of you. It's because it's definitely not the first 6, I'll tell you that much. But if you want more Shadowhunters, if you want more side characters from the Shadowhunters stories, if you found that their stories are infinitely more compelling, maybe, than the main character stories, this is your deal. Like, this is absolutely it. I am absolute trash for anything in the Shadowhunters universe from 1989 backwards, and these talk about those stories for sure, back under different days, and I'm so appreciative. And again, same set of collaborators as Cassandra Clare. I think she has a great set of writers working with her on these. There's a lot of love. You can feel when spin-offs are made with love and put in other people's hands, and I think it's just great how they've curated this stuff, so highly recommend.
My #2 is another debut novel, The Kisco Tient by Helen Wang. I love this book. And it's just...
so many people love this book, my gosh.
It's such a good adult contemporary romance. So the main character is named Stella Lane, and for her day job, she actually works with algorithms, and so she makes an insane amount of money, and she's really good at that. But what she's not very good at is dating and any physical aspects of a romantic relationship, and so she decides to take matters into her own hands and hire a professional, an escort, named Michael Fan, to help her overcome these obstacles, because she's a pretty practical person, and that seems like a logical way to, you know, fix that problem she's having. Only, the thing is, you can't really predict that sort of thing, you know, love and all of its facets. And so, while these two are working on helping Stella gain some confidence in dating and romantic relationships, they also start to fall in love with each other, and it's so good! I enjoyed this one so much. It made me laugh, it also made me cry. The secondary characters added a whole other level of love to this story because they really pop off the page. And also the two main characters are just so interesting to read about, and it's so easy to root for them both for their individual growth tracks and also as a couple. I will say that this is very steamy, so I know some people are not entirely huge fans of that, so just be warned before you go into it.
Fair
There's
warning.
a lot of steaminess in this one. But it's so good. It's actually the perfect book to take with you to the beach or when you're traveling, I want to say, because it's like one of those reads where you can just easily engage and easily disengage and then easily engage again. And it's just so good, so fun. I would highly recommend checking it out, and I'm so excited for the companion novel that is coming out in 2019 called The Bride Test.
Alrighty, rounding up to our number ones.
Oh yeah, this is definitely
To nobody's surprise, my number one book read of 2018, only because these are measured in tears, actual tears. Technically, I still have shed more tears for the Cushiel series because I love those guys, but they're not a new read for 2018.
Let me set the scene for you. It's like 3 a.m. in the morning, and I am literally asleep, and I wake up because I can hear sobbing next to me.
Hysterical-ish
And I'm
sobbing.
like, are you okay?
And that was me finishing the entire series.
Yeah, pretty much.
I present to you the Infernal Devices. They are set in the Shadowhunters world about 100-ish years prior to the events of the first 6 books, and they center around a young girl who gets brought into the Shadow Realm. So this is book series actually written in such a way that if you've never read any of the actual books before, it's a great introduction to the Shadowhunters universe. Granted, I feel like you only get to appreciate these if you've read the first 6 books, even if it's technically kind of a prequel. It basically centers around that young girl, Tessa Gray, and 2 Shadowhunters that sort of play a very central role to the story as well, Will Herondale and Jem Carstairs, and their story kind of plays out. I love these 3. They're without any love lost for the original Golden Trio, and without any hate on Harry, Ron, and Hermione at all. I found my new Golden Trio, guys. I hate love triangles. I do. I mean, it's semi-spoilery already, but come on, it's YA. There's like 2 boys and 1 girl. Really?
Where else was that gonna go?
Well, it's gonna go one way or the other, or the other, or the other. But the point is, to nobody's surprise, this sort of went on the triangly, yes, that's a word now. It went on the triangly route, and I hate those, but I love them. So, if anyone asks whether I'm team, Jim or team Will, I'm team Tessa, and all that it implies. So I highly recommend this to anybody who wants to get into the Shadowhunters without having to deal with angsty modern teenagers, because these are angsty old-timey teenagers
and British,
and they're British, so that's an extra notch up in terms of quality for me personally. No necessary hate against our modern sort of American Shadowhunters, but these British kids, and Tessa is American for that matter too, set in kind of the 1800s, totally where I live apparently, though I do appreciate the modern times. This is the 2018 series of the year for me, so and shall forever so be. Well,
this will also come as no surprise to anyone who has followed the blog or my Instagram or any account really since like 2012, but my favorite book that I read this year is this massive behemoth known as Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. This is the final book in her Throne of Glass series.
What is up, Sarah?
And I've been saying this over and over again, but it was literally the finale that I didn't know I needed. I had no idea how she was going to wrap it up for all of them. I had theories, but none of them actually came to pass, and I think that's one of the best things about this. In case you don't know what the series is about, it begins with an assassin named Selena Sardothian, who's been imprisoned in Endovir for, well, a lot of things, and she ends up getting plucked out of the prison by the prince and the captain of the guard in order to be given the opportunity to compete in a competition to become the king's champion. While she's in competition, she discovers that there's dark magic afoot in the castle, and so she has to unravel the mystery of that as well. And the series totally expands from there. A lot of other things happen, a lot of new characters show up, a lot of crazy things go down, and it is just one of the series that I hold very close to my heart. It's special to me for a lot of reasons, and it's hard for me to articulate that, but I will link you to a post that I did about it. what I love so much about this last book is that, again, like I said, it was the ending that I didn't know I wanted, but it was delivered to me in the perfect package. I enjoyed the way she wrapped up all the character arcs. I enjoyed the culmination of all the things she's been building towards. Like, it felt so satisfying to hit those points and to have those emotional beats met. I also think that it's one of those things where I am so in love with this world and these characters and their relationships and everything about the story. So the entire time I was highly emotional. I was like angry, and I was happy, and I was sad, and I was swooning, and like I was like hysterically sobbing. Like, if he was hysterically sobbing over the infernal devices, I was hysterically sobbing over this book.
In which case,
like,
this year,
loud sobbing, like full on snot dripping down my face. It was so intense and so good. Like, I loved it so much. It's so rich, and I cannot wait to re-experience this once I reread the series, which is now one of my all-time favorite series.
And this year's #1 books were brought to you and selected in the measured tiers that they have brought out collectively between the both of us. It has actually been a really great year for reading. Of course, every year is a good year for reading, but I think this year was a great year for reading.
I think so too.
All of the feels, all of the moments, both the swoony and the awesome and the angry and the just, you know, it's always everything. And the reason we read anyways because we want to get, you know, get into these kind of stories and far away from where we are now so that we can take that magic and bring it back to everywhere else that we go. So we're really glad for you guys to come along with this journey. You've seen us review these books separately across the year, but to sort of recap and mention, you know, and we're filming this like just a few days away from New Year's, is a way to kind of, a great way to actually kind of close the year out so we can start a whole new one. Even if technically our bookish new year is BA, we're actually technically just halfway through the bookish year internally, but for the rest of the human population,
it's a happy new year.
It's been a happy new year for reading, from a reading perspective.
We hope you guys enjoyed this video. We would love it if you tell us what your top 5 books maybe of 2018 is,
or top 10, whatever.
We're always like looking for new recommendations, and we love to hear what you guys love too. So,
and we have benefited a lot from your recommendations too, so just let us know.
And also, if you like this video, we would love it if you liked it, gave it a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel. We look forward to doing more videos for you guys in 2019. It's been such a fun year just interacting with everyone and sharing our thoughts on things and being silly on camera, because we always are. Without a fail.
Or with much fail, really, and that's why it's silly.
Always a fail.
All right.
Anyway, we'll see you guys with a new video soon.
Happy New Year.
Bye!